Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. First row guests are still missing, but we start. I'm Tobias Kaspar, artist and co-founder of Provence, and will moderate this panel together with Paolo Baggi, who sits on the other end, Provence member and curator. We promised our panel guests an intimate editorial meeting going public. It's slightly less intimate, but still kind of intimate. So we get there, yes. So I will introduce each panel guest individually quickly, and then we have a couple of questions before we start into a group conversation, and also we'll open up to questions from your side, just to give you a quick idea about the structure of the panel. So on my left sits Marc Spiegler, who has been for 15 years the Global Director of Art Basel, and now works independently. Claire Shiying Li, next to Marc, is a curator and art advisor based in Shanghai and London. Nelly Hoffmann is a fashion designer who has worked for the last decade for Italian heritage brand and is, together with Carlo Prada on her left, the co-founder of Concorde. What Concorde exactly is, we're going to find out throughout the panel. Next to Carlo is Balthazar Lovay, who was trained as an artist, was a curator, head of Free Art, an institution in Switzerland, as the director, and founded recently in Geneva his namesake gallery called Balthazar Lovay Fine Arts. And then, as I said, Paolo Baggi, curator, now working independently and Provence member. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And so we have a set of questions for you guys.
We thought we would start with you, since you have maybe direct hands-on experience on what agencies are, when you work with the film industry a lot, still do, connected artists to filmmakers or film production companies, when artists wanted to produce movies. So maybe can you talk about the roles agencies took in this kind of context where they directly work with a specific industry?
Jump right in. Well, before I want to address this topic,
Please.
like gallery versus agency first. Otherwise, it's like disorienting. I mean, there's like face value of this topic. Like gallery is like traditional model, and then agencies, whatever we borrowed this concept from, like fashion or film or music, right? And I think if we take it as face values, I think it could get really reductive. Like gallery is just like, we're trained to give our best in this world of 50-50, like the artist and the middleman. And that kind of becomes the scale of balancing. And then when someone or like an institution or someone be like, oh, I'm agency, you immediately know it's not 50-50. There's some other factors coming in. And you immediately like subconsciously, especially for artists, they're like, why am I getting less than I usually get when I'm making art with capital A, right? And then I think that becomes kind of negative connotation of agency. But I think actually, for me, agency as kind of a vague concept is more like alternative model to think about how we can execute an artistic strategy in the real world, but not from like traditional gallery model, which I think initially like this sort of artist or like cool curatorial gallery was interesting because they initially were like artistic strategy. So I think for me, because my main medium is more like moving images, where I want to work with people with different crafts, like not just like the mastermind of director and scriptwriter and artist. So I just want to find like a way where everyone with different background craft can feel less hierarchical working together and feel respected with where they're coming from. And I think that has been very productive because, I make most of my film in Asia, which it's relatively easy to form like a 50 people or 100 people film set. And to balance out like different expectations and skill set, especially come film world, which is more, industrialized, I believe, agency somehow is like a better form to call this productive platform and to deal with all this sort of motives and desires and etc. So yeah, that's my take.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's a good way to start, maybe to precise what we mean by agency. I mean, clearly we invited you knowing that nobody had like a specific description or understanding of what an agency is. But it seems the term does come back to an idea to like work directly with artists or having more like strict and like precise collaborations. And of course, I mean, for me as a curator, it was different, but talking with Tobias that have more this kind of artistic point of view, then you kind of shift and try to, link it to the specifics of the artist's needs and so on. Maybe Marc, we can jump to you because I remember I guess it's always this kind of thing where we talk about the COVID years, but I remember the COVID years, of course, with Art Basel and you hosting those Zoom meetings directly with like artists. And it was this kind of weird moment where the whole structure or infrastructure of Art Basel kind of diluted. And what we saw was kind of direct exchanges by you, the head, the global director, and artists that are maybe the first ones impacted in a way by Art Basel.
So I first of all, I think it's interesting to me that the director of Art Basel speaking with artists directly seems like a dilution of the model because we always dealt a lot with artists, but it's true that technically speaking, you have an art fair has a director and they have a committee, and the committee has chooses galleries, and the galleries work directly with the artists, especially with what's brought to the stand. What's really interesting to me about this question is sort of the different notions of galleries and agencies. I would say in my new life, working independently, I'm dealing a lot with people who are acting as agents for artists. I'll give you an example. I work with a company called KEF, which is one of the greatest audio brands in the world, British-based, Hong Kong-owned. And they've never done anything in the arts. And so we're seeking to do great projects involving sound. And one of the first ones that we did, in fact, the first really major one that we did, was with Miles Greenberg at the Palazzo Malpiero, which is Nicholas Berggrun's new palazzo, curated by Klaus Biesenbach. And that was brought to me by a woman named Anne Verhallen, who now is working independently, but at the time worked for an agency called 291. And she works with Miles on a lot of these kinds of projects. And what was interesting to me is that she doesn't sell Miles's art, so she's not replacing the gallery. And I think what we have to be aware of is that a lot of the new practice of artists and a lot of their business model doesn't have to do with the selling of artworks. It has to do with working with brands. It has to do with doing performances. It has to do with staging events. And this is a type of event, and it's a type of commercial activity for which galleries are often ill-suited to do because they don't have the connections. What galleries do really well and will continue to do really well, and I think it's not maybe gallery versus agency, but gallery and agency. Galleries have amazing connections with curators, and they are willing to take the huge risk of investing in doing fairs, supporting biennials, supporting museum shows. Let's be honest here. Galleries are still the ones who are going to take the biggest risk on artists and are going to continue to support their careers, often by making investments with no clear return. But I think for this new kind of activity, it's really important. I'll give you an example. I'm not going to say who it is, but there's an artist who we're potentially working with, who shows with a major gallery, but also does things in film. The major gallery wants nothing to do with funding the films. That's not what they do. It's not their bag. They sell paintings and sculptures primarily, because that's what everybody sells in the art market. And so there's a separate funding structure around this other kind of work. And the agencies are really good at that. They're going out and getting sponsors like KEF or like some of the other companies that I work with. They're striking deals. They're building production teams, and all this kind of thing. And so I think it's representative of two things. One is representative of the way that the market has developed, which is to say that there's this new realm of activity that galleries are not so well suited to take part in, and frankly, are too busy just trying to stay alive to sort of take on these new things, which are distracting and often time-consuming. But the other thing is this. The visual arts have always been singular within all creative domains for the fact that there is nobody who stands between the artist and the distribution platform, right? Every musician, every writer, every film director, every model has an agent. And the agent's job is to be your bastard. Your agent's job is to have the really tough discussions with the people who are going to pay the artist and strike a good deal so that afterwards everyone can go to a great dinner and shake hands and enjoy, right? That's the agent's job. You know, and the fact that doesn't exist within the visual arts, to some degree, has to do with some very precious notions about not talking about money. You know, we don't say we're selling well. We're saying, oh, we're very happy. You know, okay, fine. You know, but what kind of happy are you? Well, we're kind of happy. We're less happy than our neighbors. You know, whatever. But the point is, so not talking about money means that artists don't have agents, and usually that's their disadvantage, because usually what happens is that the gallery serves as the artist's agent, and that is sometimes a conflict of interest. Or the artist serves as their own agent, and some artists are well equipped for that, and more are. But generally speaking, the people who become artists do so because they have, let's say, a different mentality than that of a business person. And what's interesting to me is, I think, generally speaking, every creative person who's successful needs a business person standing at their side and between them and the market to be really successful so they can focus on creation. Sorry, long answer.
No, thanks. No, it allows me to go to, well, direct implementations of maybe Nelly and Carlo. We come to you now because I just heard you before, maybe it was yesterday, mentioning that Concorde was a voice for you. And I just heard this term. So maybe I was wondering if you could expand a bit on this.
Yeah, as you said, me and Nelly, we founded Concorde in 2021. And the precondition of this project is a friendship. And we felt that we need to voice some shared vision of our daily routines or the daily objects that surrounded us. And so we start making objects. I'm calling them objects because we refuse to define them as art, and we also refuse to define them as design. We eschew the definition, the strict definition of that, and we prefer the viewer or the user to define them as they please. So once these objects are created, we usually act in this way. And I'm saying this because originally the word agency that was next to us in the invitation of the panel was removed on my request because it put some ambiguity to what we are actually doing. But then I thought about it, and actually is right. Maybe the way we move through our objects is similar to what a potential agency does. Why? We get contacted by galleries. At this point, our objects, they can be exhibited within a collective exhibition. But there is another element that I think is more interesting in relation to what we are talking now on this panel, and it's when a gallery contacts us in order to create a whole package of a concept which involves contacting different artists, obviously in discussion with the gallery, creating a story or a narrative in order to create a show, create objects that function as a sort of display systems for the artists involved with us within the aforementioned show. And finally, also including in all this text and art direction of all the images that are related to the exhibition. So at this point, our objects, they live a double life. On one side, we are creating a connecting fabric between us and other artists. And in this, by doing this, our objects sort of reflect the network that is a main concept within the art world. And, but in second instance, also, they live independently and autonomously as pieces that someone can use, bring it home, display on it something, or just leave them as they are, as sculpture. I don't know. As I said, we refuse to give a definition of that. So,
our only gallerist on the panel, but you, as I said at the beginning, you were trained as an artist, you were a curator before, but as Marc put, galleries not necessarily always work in the main and sole interest of the artist, but have their own interest, of course. Some artists solve it by being strong themselves or have an in-house shark, a studio manager, doing some kind of their, agency service, or they outsource it. What is your perspective on, on that from the gallery point of view?
Yeah, so thanks so much. So when I transitioned from being a curator and a director of Kunsthalle to a gallerist, I wanted to have a more autonomy in my work and also work in the commercial world, also for my own autonomy. And the question I asked myself was more not what is the model I would like to create, but more what the artist needs. What could we be or could I do better for artists in a term of selling their art? And with two parameters. One was that, I'm sorry to be very conservative, but I think art is a marathon. Developing an artist and accompanying them toward the future is a long-term marathon. And the second element was that, of course, art is a luxury object, a commodity kind of, but it's also a thinking. And to convey a thinking, even in terms of business, even if selling it, takes a lot of time. So then, of course, I explored various options, because I used to work also in the music world before, and I had in mind the booking agent system, right? So there's existing venues, like, I don't know, the big 4 galleries that everyone knows about would be the music venues, and agent would go from Zwirner to Hauser and say, oh, I have this project with this artist. Would you like to book this person? But then the long-term element doesn't fit in that. And I think what artists needs is a rock and a sustained system to back their practice. So at the end, I had to do a gallery, a traditional model of a gallery. And I would say but the elephant in the room is that the gallery is an agent too. It's an agency, right? A kind of an agency. We can say there's pros and cons, and some things work, some things don't work less. But I think to join what Marc was saying is that the discussion is the witness. This discussion is more the witness of the fragmentation of the art world, the fragmentation of the art market, and that this direct relationship between artist, gallery, collector works, but it's not enough. There's like a huge expansion of the geography. There's all these categories. We can talk about comics and all masters, everything. So the world hasn't shrinked, it has expanded. And within this fragmentation, maybe we need various models that work with each other. We need agencies. Agencies need gallery. Artists need galleries who are sustainable rocks behind them. For the moment, that's it. If that makes sense.
I have one question more from the fashion background. While preparing the talk, Nina Hollensteiner, our Provence fashion editor, just told me she used to have an exclusive contract with her agents in the fashion industry, but just received the email that this exclusive contract was ceased. She can do now whatever she wants. When the agency has some bookings for her, they will book her, but there's no more exclusiveness. And we were kind of looking at the film industry, at the fashion industry as the agency as of a reference, but turns out over there, it's also kind of crumbling and changing. Is there Concorde, so Nelly and Carlo, is there something, could you describe that shift in that scene a bit?
In the fashion industry, it's very weird because, like, basically everyone have an agent. So you can be a stylist, you can be a photographer, you can be a model, you can be also a fabric company, which is like selling fabric. You all, like, basically everyone have an agency. Also because, like, what you say, like, it's kind of a bouclier of a scooter. Like, you need someone to deal with all the everyday life, money stuff, which is a bit weird. And so yeah, like now, for example, the exclusivity thing that you were saying, the contract and stuff, it's very weird because, like, for example, Elite, the agency of model, they used to have like this big agency and then to open some small agency in every country. So to basically have a spot, but it's too much expensive now. So they are maybe approaching like having some sustained on other agency and they are like just splitting the fee. But also, this is something very weird that, like, to me was very, I was, like, with an artist before, and, like, it was very weird because I was very surprised when he started to work with a gallery. The fee of the gallery is 50%, so it's half of the amount of the artist. And the very weird thing, you say you are an agent when you're a gallerist, right? Somehow. But it's very weird because, for example, in fashion, it's around 20 and 25%. Everywhere. So it's kind of
20% for the agency or for the artist?
20% for the agency.
Just to clarify. You never know. Yeah.
No, so it's kind of weird because I think this amount is very symbolizing how much the gallery should be involved compared to an agency somehow. So it's say like 20% of involving for an agent and 50% for a gallerist. Also because an agent maybe have a lot of clients, and a gallery should be like, I don't know, how many artists do you have? Sorry, you're the only gallerist,
no,
so
for the moment,
focusing on you. But
yeah, for the moment, 4.
But I mean, it's you can focus on that, I think. So it's easier. Yeah, it's also because of the proposition. I think like art world is getting bigger and bigger somehow. So there is a lot more of artists. There is a lot more of gallery. Like gallery die, gallery born. So I think it's cycle of life. But yeah, it's the more proposal there is, the more solution you need, somehow.
May I add something? Yeah, like this is generally being said already, but I think that has been recognized is within the art world. I think that many options are available and can be accepted, but at the same time, we have to acknowledge the fact that a gallery is something that cannot be bypassed by anything else, because it's the gallery at the end of the day that allows a work of art to gain what is called a symbolic value on one side and to gain a market value. And these two elements are something that only a gallery managed to achieve in connection with the artist that you represent. Then again, the value of an artwork, of course, is elaborated by many other aspects, but I think that the gallery is mandatory in doing this, and there is no agency that can replace that role.
No, it's a collaboration. I mean, like I think everyone needs everyone somehow.
There are different impacts. Each model has a specific impact on the artist's life and on collectors, institutions, clients' life and daily operation. So it's really about what kind of impact we can have, all of us, on a different level. Yeah.
If I could just throw in a couple of things here. One of the... I hesitate when I hear words like mandatory, because I think we live in a very fluid and ever-changing world. One of the things I did when I left Art Basel was to have conversations with artists, and to sort of, I mean, artists usually with whom I was friends, and to say, how do you see the art world evolving? And, you know, if you could give Marc Spiegler a job, what would that job be? Like, what do you think I should be doing on behalf of the art world? And one of the most interesting conversations I had, I too with Doug Aitken and Arthur Jaffa, actually exactly a year ago during this weekend. And Doug's point was that he sees an art world in which there's a real bifurcation between two types of art, which have two types of market. And one is object-driven art, mostly painting and sculpture, which represents 85% of the market. And then the other is things like, performance and, sinking sculptures off the stage off the shore of Catalina Island. And the first type of art is highly speculative, and it has the kind of market which can support galleries if they're involved in the secondary market of their artists. The second type of art is something which needs a totally different kind of funding, which is very hard to sell. Maybe you make derivative objects that you can sell in your gallery, maybe not. And there what you really need is more like a producer, like a film, like an agency. You need someone to pull together money, figure out the revenue streams, bring it in, et cetera. And he felt, and I think it's accurate, that these are almost two different markets, and therefore that's why I think we see that artists who work in both of those markets have both the gallery that's selling their objects and maybe an agent who's doing these other kinds of projects. But by the way, and this is why I object to the term mandatory, if you are an artist, and there are artists like this who only survive by doing residencies and biennials and museum shows, then you're not of much use for a gallery. But you are a viable artist, and there what you need is an agent, and you could call them your lawyer, or you could call them the head of your studio, but functionally, they're your agent. The other thing I should point out, and this is nothing against galleries, it's just a fact. Statistically, the Art Basel UBS Art Market Report shows this every year, 3 or 4 artists represent more than 50% of every gallery's revenues. And naturally, those 3 or 4 artists are going to get the most attention. It's just the way things work, because you're trying to make sure a bigger gallery doesn't poach them, And this is why I think it's important for artists to make sure that they're defending their own interests as well, Last point I would make is this: the artist is the gallery is sometimes the agent and sometimes the distribution platform. The difference is that in other industries, the agent is not the one fronting all the money for production, for making films, for making biennial shows, et cetera, et cetera. And so the gallerist is put in this double position of both working as the artist's agent and also being their producer, and it can put you out of business. So it's actually a healthy thing to think about who can be that intermediary and what role can they play.
Yeah.
Back to the very first question that Paolo asked you about the relationship during your time at Art Basel, 15 years. How did the fair relationship change with artists? Because now, this year, for the first time, there's the Art Basel shop curated by the former Colette founder. And they produce merchandise editions. And this is, I assume, produced with Art Basel with the artists, I guess through the gallery somehow. But again, it's an example of the fair becoming closer with artists. How did you experience that during your time with the fair, and how did you maybe initiate that also?
There are 2 questions. One is about the shop. I don't know any idea what the business model is for the shop. I assume that no, I make no assumptions, because I haven't even studied who's in it. I think there's some really great objects in it. I think it's interesting to have worked with the woman who co-founded Colette. A lot of cases, those I assume the objects which are being sold were produced by the artist independently or with an agent. So I don't know if the galleries are even involved. Presumably, you wouldn't fill that shop with artists who are not represented by any Art Basel gallery for political reasons. But let's leave that to the side. I don't think our relationship with artists changed. When I started in 2007, Sam Keller gave me some really good advice. He said, stay close to the artists. People said, where's Art Basel going next? I said, go to the studios, because wherever the artists are going, we have to follow them. And so I always tried to keep a good circle of artists around me and ask them what was important, what they thought, how things were moving, et cetera. And I think, Sam was close to artists. I was close to artists. Micah, Clement, who is here, Angel, et cetera, the directors of the fairs, Vincenzo De Bellis, of course, great curator, one of his generation before I brought him back to the dark side, you have to stay close to artists if you're going to be a great fair director, because in the end, the galleries bring the art, but if the artists aren't engaging with your fair, if the artists aren't interested in your fair, but the big shift happened before me. Like, it used to be that artists didn't come to fairs, you know? And that shifted. I think artists recognize that the fairs are places where the whole world comes together and where it's not a great place to see art. I said this when I was working at Art Basel. I'll say it again. It's not the ideal conditions, but it is a great place to discover artists who you wouldn't know before. It's a great place to discover galleries you should be following, not just on Instagram, but actually going to their venues, you know? But I always saw it as something where, as much as I wasn't directly connected to them, although sometimes, you know, if you saw a great project, you'd be like, can we bring this to Messeplatz? Can we bring this to Miami? You know, and you would just work directly, and then you would go to the gallery afterwards.
Thank you. Yeah.
I kind of want to add one more comment. Earlier, you said there are kind of two parts of agency work. One is kind of the production. The other side is kind of promoting. I would call that creating this sort of adjacent content and events, which sometimes I think what fairs do. Yeah. So if we look at like gallery and fair model, and there's two, you know, they're collaborating. One is kind of like sustainable, long-term, staying super close to artists, being their parents. And then the other is like create this like mega event to attract people and actually that promote artists in this great global way. I think in terms of agent, actually, there are also these two types of agent, and I think they're actually more fluid than you think. One agent is what I call this productive platform, which like when I run this acting method, this film production, we really like super underground, and we stay close to artists, we co-create a piece together. But when it comes to how we push it to the market or institution platform, we need another type of agency who are really good at creating content and events, which I think fashion agency actually do a great job at it. I mean, I came from this, you know, especially in Asian context, like China, Korea, people don't go to exhibitions like in their daily activities. People are not interested. But people really dress up to go to fashion shows. People bring this great energy. They want to talk about Lovay, they want to talk about Balenciaga, and they want to hang out with all the like the Instagram, the content generator, and people want to build their own brand, and everyone wants to be artists in their own way. So anyway, but that's actually the catalyst of art world. Like we actually rely on them to blow up what we're trying to say. So, and I think these type of two agencies also, they kind of blur the line of gallery and institutions. I actually think like now institutions pouring money and budget into exhibitions already a lot. And sometimes maybe it's interesting for them to collaborate like fashion agency or film agency when it take on more, you know, like special projects, let's say.
I'm going to say one sentence. There's a third kind of agent, which we're not talking about. And there's, I mean, Amir Shariat, who first became well known as a curator and collector, does this very well. They work directly with agents, and they bring them to galleries. And they take a percentage. And like they literally place these artists with galleries, and they are very much involved in the commercial side, you know. And they know they have the contacts. Maybe they even help to fund shows. But like, Amir's is a good example. I'm sure there are others of someone who's like literally successfully taken artists that nobody knew and then placed them with galleries all over the world to great effect.
And I think that third type also do kind of geographical brokerage, let's say. Like someone is like had great exposure in Europe, but in America somehow people just don't get it. And there are people like that who are really good at like kind of translating this cultural difference. And sometimes just like one person is good at commercial and in one continent, and the other continent is like just institutions, and you can kind of create this kind of swapping with sort of activist way of working.
Carlo, you grinned a little bit when you heard some fashion brands, and also in a preliminary talk we had together, you said if an artist is working with a specific brand or any fashion brand, you're not so interested anymore as a collector, but you have a deep understanding of the fashion industry, so maybe I don't know if you're open to share with us kind of where this inner struggle comes from for you.
Yeah, basically, I used to work at the Daily Telegraph back in the 90s, and I was working in fashion back then. And I belong to a generation that learned how to keep a separation between art and fashion. And back then, I was not really questioning the thing, but through working at the Daily Telegraph, I gradually came to understand why. At some point, there was a major structural change back then, which involved the market, which involved artists who embraced gradually and more exponentially, that celebrity element. And so we had, for example, artists such as Tracy Emin or Damien Hirst that started to appearing recurrently on tabloids. That was something that was not happening before that. And then we had all this collaboration between major luxury labels such as Louis Vuitton in premise, who hired through Marc Jacobs, for example, artists such as Takashi Murakami or Richard Prince and Steven Sprouse. Steven Sprouse is a particular case because despite Marc Jacobs ostentatiously tried to portray him as an artist, in reality it wasn't. So this helped through with his career, because after that he managed to, for example, collaborate with Knoll International or Diesel and fashion labels. But the case, for example, of Takashi Murakami is emblematic in a way, because in that specific case, I think that the collaboration between fashion and art worked. And why? Because the art by Takashi Murakami can be considered a sort of Japanese Andy Warhol, somehow doesn't go and contrast with the Louis Vuitton production. The philosophy of Takashi Murakami belongs to the idea of kawaii, of this super flat sort of portraying of the Japanese culture, which on the other side is particularly fond on Louis Vuitton. So at this point, there is this, how can I say, the two things are meeting and resulting in a collaboration that, in my opinion, didn't affect the career of the artist, because in some sort he was not contradicting it. And there is this, I remember reading that, for example, in this exhibition, Takashi Murakami incorporated in the museum exhibition a shop of bags by Louis Vuitton. So in that sense, it means that the bags were consecrated as an object of art. That said, I remain pretty much opinionated when it comes to art and fashion, because for me, the two things are have to be evaluated through different criteria. Criteria are used for art, and for fashion, we used market criteria, okay? And I want to quote one thing that Coco Chanel said back then, but for me it's pretty emblematic. And Coco Chanel said, "A dress is neither a tragedy nor a painting. It is a charming and ephemeral creation, not an everlasting work of art. Fashion should die, and die quickly, in order that commerce may survive." Now that I'm reading this, this may hide a sort of attack to Elsa Schiaparelli, who actually was hiring artists, as we know, and collaborating with them very much. But we have to distinguish here that Elsa Schiaparelli was producing something as more similar to haute couture, and therefore unique, and therefore based on a concept of uniqueness that is more relatable and connected to art. On the other side, Coco Chanel was creating
commercial pieces,
prêt-à-porter, and but I think that this is emblematic to define the different values of fashion and art, because value of clothes diminishes by the day, while the value of art should increase with time.
But wait. I'm gonna stop you now, because for example, it's very weird, but since maybe 10 years, you see some old Chanel bag which are way more expensive than the new one. So it's also they take a shift on the fashion world too. So there's collectible on vintage, and it's fucking crazy. Sorry. Like still.
The numbers are against you, Carlo. I mean, like if you see kids hanging out in front of Supreme, it's because they know the stuff is going to double in value more quickly than any artwork does. You know.
So yeah, you can resell it the day after.
Yeah, I mean, it should was the important word in that sentence.
Say again, sorry.
Should. I mean, in theory, the value of clothes should diminish, but often it doesn't, and the value of art should increase, but very often it doesn't.
I'm meaning here like more probably a symbolic value.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
A symbolic value to it rather than a market value. That's the thing I was meaning.
But the little black dress by Chanel was a groundbreaking thinking and is still a major change in the world. So the symbolic value, I think, of the little black dress is even stronger now.
Very symbolic value in fashion, I think so too. And also maybe it's easier for everyone. It's more accessible, so it makes it more real than art somehow. Sorry, I'm not defending fashion.
Well, I mean, there's this trend right now of textile art or like wearables. You see textile exhibitions in museums all over the world. And I think that's precisely trying to break this boundary between like, you know, the traditional painting, sculpture in traditional art and sort of collectible, wearable, let's say, garments or something. And I think it's interesting in fashion, like there's a clear definition of haute couture and then ready to wear, and then there's like
haute couture, which is dying, by the way, because they're like maybe Treehouse doing it still because it's too expensive and like doesn't make so much sense.
Yeah,
now.
and then sneakerhead, and New Supreme, and I think maybe in the art world it's less like that. I think like almost all art objects can come into one big criteria or like pricing system instead of, I think in fashion, like it's still different.
I mean, as someone who sits on the board of directors of Superblue, which is entirely engaged in immersive and experiential art, and whose business model doesn't involve selling art, I'd have to contradict that. I mean, there's a whole other world, you know, like Arthur Jaffa does films, like Doug Aitken sinks sculptures off the coast of, Team Lab does 27 pieces in the middle of Roppongi Hills, and you pay admission like you're going to a museum or an amusement park, you know. I think this is yet another example of where I think a whole parallel market is developing and needs to develop to sustain the kind of work. And what's interesting is I think the art world is going to have to really adapt to this because there's this huge generational wealth shift that's about to happen. Is it $50 trillion? Is it $100 trillion? It doesn't matter. A ton of money is about to go to a generation which is defined by the fact that it doesn't want to own objects as much as their parents did. And that's going to be something that the art world needs to deal with because what the art galleries and art fairs and everybody else and museums do really well is deal with objects.
Not ideas.
Well, not experiences. You know, that's what wealthy young people pay for.
Yeah, that's also COVID.
You know, they don't want a car.
Yeah, that's.
You know, they don't. You know, they want to do a great vacation or do wellness. They don't want to own a bunch of objects. So
they want to live more
now we're
sustainably.
going really far.
Well,
Balthazar, can you imagine having experience on the gallery rooster? No, it's not something that that the gallery model is really made for to represent.
No, but when Abramovich did this performance at the MoMA called The Artist is Present, and it's not that I'm particularly interested in that performance, but I thought it was an expression of why are people going to a museum to have very, very particular and dense experience. And I thought that was a very strong turning point in the global art world, not in specific discussion we can have here, but I thought it was a major turning point. That to see thousands and hundreds of people waiting to just sit in front of someone within a museum. So yeah, it is.
Ciao.
The artist is present.
Exactly. Manifestation.
Great. We agree.
Well, yeah, I mean, we have been talking a lot about the fashion industry, but maybe it would have been also relevant to talk about the entertainment industry, right? Because it seems, I mean, also the fashion one that did get closer, and Balthazar with this example, it seems maybe agencies seem to have maybe this kind of capacity to articulate those kinds of experiences and to be closer to this form of industry. Marc, I guess this...
I mean, I alluded to other industries before, and I was talking about the fact that, like, you know, film directors and stars and cameramen all have agents. You know, I think, you know, what an agency does, like CAA, is they do all, it's like a 360 thing. Like if you work with them, they handle your films, they handle your sponsorships, they handle your collabs, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I think that's probably what we're going to. I think within the fashion agent, like a fashion agent represents one specific skill that you have, that you sell to your client. I think the Hollywood model is one in which basically everything that you know, they're also finding you a stylist who finds, you know, who gets you the ball for the gown for the Met Gala or whatever. But the point is that I think this kind of 360 notion of monetizing someone's skills and their personality is something that's probably closer to what an agency does in film, let's say, than in fashion or sort of what a gallery does.
Well, to be honest, so like all the sort of bigger film I did, or like the bigger solo show I did, all came from fashion funding.
Yeah.
And when it's fashion funding, they tell you like the opening performance have to wear the clothes from our brand. And then that's where you have to stand in between, be like, no, like we have to sort of try other things. And sometimes just a friction of the control, artistic control, right? But then I think in terms of entertainment, there's almost more potential in that. Like I want to mention, like, I mean, Hollywood model is great. And I think there are great producers there. They really, you know, master this craft of being agent. But also there's K-pop and hip-hop. Yeah. And if you look at like a K-pop agency, probably most of the work they do is actually managing the community. Mm-hmm. to shepherd the fan base, and that's where the money from, actually. Instead of the sort of singular company, it's like all these people like either buying merch or donating, and that's like a totally different economy, but that's actually really efficient, or it doesn't really go by the sort of festival schedule or museum schedule. It's really kind of in a way populist, but like I guess there's more. That's what like younger generation.
But K-pop is a weird industry because the stars are actually employees. You know, like they're not freestanding in the same way that Western music stars often are. Like the K-pop stars are not like Taylor Swift in the sense that they don't become a business. They work for a business, which then monetizes them and gives them a cut. But I agree with you in the broader notion.
I mean, in Milan, there was this show, Valentino, and like there was a K-pop involved star. It was crazy because it was the first time there were like lines of people. Yeah. Like really, it was wow. And everyone was super surprised. No one was expecting that. So it was really shocked. For example, for fashion to get back to entertaining was weird. Wow.
Back to the art world. Example of Helen Molesworth, a curator, not known as a blockbuster curator necessarily, but who had to resign or left Mocha LA a couple of years ago. And now, maybe she needs an agent too. Now she produces podcasts. Death of an Artist became really popular.
Sorry, I missed her name?
Helen Molesworth.
Yeah. Okay.
After producing Death of an Artist, now she's producing podcasts for Werner, meeting with Benjamin Buchloh in the gallery, talking about Gerhard Richter. And like critical, good content, but like really catered and made for a big audience. And this is where actually it's produced with Pushkin Industries, so entertainment industry coming in and producing this content. So it's also on that level you have a complete shift. The audience is becoming bigger, bigger, and bigger. Question.
I had this word of the taste also, and to which extent maybe, I mean, we were talking about the market, about galleries that maybe represent some kind of social capital to push this kind of symbolic value of art. But is there a way in which agencies maybe can have a structure that is closer to taste, and maybe because taste has to be handled differently now?
You mean like art direction somehow?
Yeah, or working in a specific context where taste can be shifted, modified. Maybe in some part of the world it changed a lot. I'm thinking of also, Marc, when you talked about Art Basel, when you talk about it, it seems like a very light, almost like an agency structure, right? And you could describe it in that sense. And of course, when we think about examples like Miami, for example, in a way like Art Basel activated a specific spot. Of course, it was an ecosystem that existed before Art Basel, but it kind of nested in this ecosystem. So it seems in that sense you could have this idea of an agency that activates like this kind of taste and can shift to taste. And so hearing those discussions about how like young kids like hang around the Supreme stores and so on, is there a way where like galleries or those kinds of like bigger structure think about the agency to fit better this evolving taste? I don't know if that's maybe this can be like this open question for all of you.
Very open.
I think a program gallery does that, right? What we call a program gallery. And a program gallery is a gallery that has a certain kind of intellectual through line, and the artists make sense with each other. Often they work together. I think we're kind of in a post-movement era, but we're not in a post-aesthetics or topics era. And I I could cite many examples. The one that, at 11:30 on a Saturday morning comes to mind is Isabella Bortolozzi. Like, Isabella's artists all make sense together. It's an intellectual family. They're from different generations, You have Diamond Stingley and Pierre Klosowski, and like they all make sense together. That's why her booths are always incredible, because it's objects and artists who are in harmony. And so I think there's a long tradition of this. Castelli drove a certain kind of taste. Paula Cooper drove a certain kind of taste. The great galleries function because they have an incredible intellectual coherence, and it makes sense, and they attract collectors to one artist. And because that artist, it's like, that you're attracted to that. It's like you discover Italian food because of one dish. And then you discover this incredible panoply that goes from Puglia to Tuscany. But you come in through that one dish. And the same way, I think with a program gallery, because it's coherent, you come in through the one artist and you discover an entire universe. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they drive that taste.
Yeah, but it's weird because, do you think now collectors are going to a gallery and to discover other artists, they don't know what they want? Because everyone is well informed now. Somehow.
When I talk to galleries, they do not talk about highly well-informed collectors. They talk about people who spend too much time on Instagram, and that is a different thing than being well-informed.
Fair enough.
But I know what you mean. I think it's quite flat in a way. Like, all the information are like fighting for attention.
Yeah.
But I do think in that case, again, there's a question of what content versus art, right? So I think in this sort of explosion of information, explosion of content, taste is even more important now.
Because you have to pick up and select somehow.
Yes. It's almost better to be more niche or be more direct with the taste.
I agree.
We still have 15 minutes left on a panel, but if there are questions from the audience, we can start now to open up. There's a microphone which is going to be circulating.
With no surprise, I see Alain Servet with his hand up in the front row.
No surprise. Hello. No surprise to Marc because he knows I love the subject. Very interesting concepts you touched all across. I see two are missing. Is first clarity. That's one of the problems of the art world, is that nobody dares even to speak properly about the things like you do. We still are in the model of galleries and art fair because they are the only one with money in their pockets right now. So nobody dares to speak about it. And be transparent, and the question of the contract. Nobody dares to speak about the contract and knowing exactly what you're committing. And I give you one example. Is my daughter did a end of studies thesis about artist agency. She interviewed 75 represented artists around the world from all countries and all continents. And she came back to me, said, "Daddy, wow," because it was a standard questionnaire and the whole thing. 90% of the artists are unhappy with their galleries. Then she moved to the galleries. She interviewed 30 galleries. Then she came back to me and said, "Daddy, I've got a problem because all the galleries said they have no problem with their artists. So how can it be?" So I thought about it for 2 seconds, and then I said, go back to the galleries and ask them what is their conception of representing an artist. And the thing was exactly this: is that there was a total misunderstanding between what the artist considered necessary as representation and what the galleries thought, because nobody speaks about it. Nobody put it in writing. And that's the problem. So you need to be putting very clearly, you need to underline this on this panel, that it needs to be put in writing. There's nothing wrong. You know, I remember I was on a panel 15 years ago already in Talking Galleries, and I was talking about contracts, and a gallerist told me, asked me a question, Alain, you're fine, you're a collector, but, don't speak about what you don't know, because, a relationship between a gallerist and an artist is a love relationship and so on. And I said to the gallerist, are you married? Yes.
Yeah.
Did you sign a contract? Yes. Why? Why do you have to sign a contract?
Because the relationship can end.
Exactly. So that's that thing about transparency is totally lacking in all the notions that you raised, and I think you should underline it or discuss it. Second is economies of scale. You spoke about four artists, and you spoke about economies of scale. The problem of the galleries right now is that you have the mega galleries that are able to spread out their costs very widely, and they're crushing all the rest. Very logically, because it happens the same with Tesla and Ford and whatever else, and even LVMH and Kering, because that's what they do at a very high level. And the problem is galleries must understand they cannot provide all the services, like PR, like production of works and so on. And they should accept to share that relationship to artist agencies, which are not selling in any circumstances. So anyway, it needs to be going further, but those two notions of contract and economies of scale, and speaking bluntly about that art is a business now, and it's not a kind of a love relationship like it was 15 years or 20 years ago.
Thank you.
We
Nelly,
do contract.
you immediately wanted to react.
No, sorry, it's really funny, like you were talking about this, like it's really funny what your daughter did. I really appreciate. I asked to my friends, because of this panel, to some of my artist friends, I asked, what do you need from your galleries? And it's very weird because there was this recurrent mythological stories about Leo Castelli, which were giving salary to artists. So it was a permanent paycheck, even if they were not selling or showing. It was it was very weird. And they were like, yeah, you see, kind of a dream.
Two of them, to two of the roster, not to everyone.
Oh, two artists.
Just two.
But it was really like like the dream. So yeah, on that, it's interesting. Something like is not working.
I would be surprised if those paychecks weren't accounted as advances against future sales.
Maybe.
Which, by the way, is
but it's not wouldn't be a problem.
That's how signing bonuses work with galleries now. When a gallery gets, when someone gets $10 million to join a gallery, it's not 10 million cash. It's basically we're giving you 10 million, and that's coming out of your first 20 million of sales. And then we split it 50-50. It's just
it's an advance.
That's how it works in publishing. And it's true that there's also no contracts, generally speaking, between collectors and galleries. So there's a complete absence of contractual relationships
between collectors and
galleries when they buy.
Oh, so you mean to have
everyone is afraid of contracts.
Well, there's an invoice at the end, but there's no contract at.
Yeah, that you won't sell or you won't go back. Yeah. Nothing written.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I just have a question. We've covered all the commercial and transactional aspects, I think, in a somewhat in a limited capacity, but we don't have the time to expand here. A gallery, of course, it's a commercial platform. It's also a context, and relationship to art is relationship to a context. And when artists show within galleries, you've said it, Marc, they also, position themselves within a certain discourse in the art market. And so my question is for you, Concorde, for instance. You currently are showing with Emanuela Campodi in Paris.
Yes.
What do you expect from this relationship?
With the gallerist or with the artist we're involved in the show?
Both.
Both.
It's what kind of context
good question.
does this like?
Maybe you can start by quickly describing you.
Yes.
You put a show together in Paris, but now you also kind of created a campaign for the Art Basel booth.
Yep. Do you want to start? No, you start.
Okay, yeah. So the relation with Manuela Campoli started in this way. Like we were asked to curate a sort of show at her gallery. So we selected a group of artists, part of the gallery, but also from outside the roster, and then create a sort of concept in order to display our objects within the gallery, and these objects to be the display systems for the artist involved. These objects, they stay with Manuela on a consignment. We are not represented by any gallery.
We have a one-year consignment signed.
But at the same time, there is one production that we usually create for the gallery, which is basically either unique pieces or pieces that are produced in a very small edition. And then by ourselves, we create other objects that have a complete different way of reaching the public, and which means they are serial, basically. So, yeah.
No, the question was what do we expect, right? To sell? I mean, is it bad to say it? No.
This commercial ambition is nested within an artistic context. It's not a pop-up store. It's obviously an exhibition. And when you show it Emanuela, you also show it in a larger context, a broader context, with artists like in the likes of Jutta Kötter, of Judah Cenci. You know, like you also, in a way, contextualize your work differently than you would in an online platform, you know.
But it is very nice also because, like, for example, with the artists, we have these relationships which is not based on money, because we are not taking any fee on the artist work we are inserting inside the gallery.
I'm not questioning that at all.
But it's interesting because, like, for example, that's a point which interests us, for example, on group show. It's because, like, somehow you can choose some people which, like, maybe there's some tension with the galleries, like they are not used to work with this gallery, maybe the gallery hate each other. So it's kind of very weird because you can create some situations which are a bit tense, but somehow very interesting. And also you can meet some people that you would maybe never met somehow. And it's very nice. Like, I think we are in a very privileged situation because we are nothing. So we are just some glue. So there is no expectation. There is no one to say that what we are, what we need to do. The only thing that we need is selling, because we need money to produce more.
Yeah, but you also produced something that's just more than the sum of its parts, you know? You've produced an artistic experience.
Somehow. Yeah.
I like that show, by the way.
Thank you. Nice to hear.
Sorry, I'm
no, also, like, for example, like the Daniele's work, Daniele Milvio works, which was in the exhibition in Paris. He made it on purpose for the. It was an adaptation of the show what was at Amanite in New York, but it was an adaptation for the support. So it's very nice because it's like a dialogue between display, which also I think, like, maybe in the gallery, I'm always very shocked about the display. I think it's very bad. Like, it's not curated. It's just like, put your work inside the gallery is a box, and it's fine like this. I don't think it's enough. I think it's something that needs to be a bit, like, I mean, in Italy, we have some very good example of that on display. Albini, display system for art. It's supposed to be more like historical arts somehow, like archaeological.
Yeah, but also it's something that was a topic that was touched earlier on in terms of taste. There are absolutely some galleries, like, for example, another one could be Maxwell Graham, that are very good in communicating a specific bunch of artists and a specific aesthetic. And at the same time, something that me and Nelly always think of is how artworks within the context of the gallery could communicate with each other, and how this display system also maybe could work within the context of art fair, where usually the artwork is just hanging there without no connection whatsoever with each other. And for example, we attended the Mi Art Fair, and the modern section was far more interesting in a way than the contemporary one, because the modern section managed actually to create a narrative between the artworks that were exhibited.
And I think maybe that's
So-
the role of an agency, like somehow to create, like, because you have this, if you are not Paola Cooper and you don't have this aesthetic harmony around your artist, maybe like the agency help you because you don't have this relationship direct with the artist, okay, you can pick up somehow. Because also I think it's something that we are not talking about, but like if a gallery is going to a fair, and you have like love story with your artist, how do you choose the artist you are bringing to the fair?
Can I just say one thing in defense of galleries and art fairs? Like, as much as I don't think the art fair is the ideal way to exhibit art, if you go to Art Basel next week, you will see many, many, many great booths where galleries have chosen very specifically which artists from their program work well together, and maybe next year they'll choose a completely different set of artists. And when they don't do it is when they get in trouble. When they do something that feels like a sample platter, or when they have very random art, like maybe great artists, but they have no relationship to each other, that's when they start to have discussions with the committees about, you know, you need to improve your presentation, you need to improve your, you know, the quality of your work, you know, and I think the goal of an art fair is still that each booth should serve as a kind of coherent microcosm for the gallery, a part or of the gallery's program or the gallery's entire program. You know, the goal is not just to throw some stuff up on the wall. That's not a good art fair booth. Those kinds of booths are the booths that kill all the entire fair around them.
But there are a lot.
I'm not arguing with that. I just said that is the kind of booth that you try to eradicate over the long run if you're running a great art fair.
And you brought also up the topic of gallery architecture, and you can link it to experience. Stephen from Empty Gallery is another example of having a very particular, you know, take of a gallery, which is when you visit it, it's a real experience. And this is completely in contrast to what Michael Sanchez wrote like 15 years ago in his essay, where he like describes with the rise of social media, contemporary art daily, how galleries were really unified around the globe, the perfect white cube. I think now galleries, at least program galleries, the one that we still have around, shift away from that and try to have signature style architectures, because you can recognize it, and it is kind of an experience to visit them. So just this to add, yeah.
It's also like, I mean, Stephen's gallery, let's be super clear. It's in an industrial district. There's one other gallery in that neighborhood. You go to an industrial building, you go up a tiny industrial elevator, and you come out into a dark cube of a space. I mean, it's the most singular experience, but it's not just the architecture of a gallery, it's also where is it? Where is it in the city? Have you chosen to be, you know, is it like Isla Flotante in Buenos Aires, where it's like, you know, at the edge, it's in La Boca, like one of the worst neighborhoods, you know, in Buenos Aires? Are you choosing to be on the Upper East Side? Are you choosing to be on the Lower East Side? Are you choosing to be, all that stuff matters, you know?
Yeah, it's a statement already.
Yeah.
Back to taste.
Back to taste, yeah.
It's also a matter of taste, all these, you know, decisions.
Each and positioning.
And positioning, yeah, exactly. You choose your neighborhood, you choose a client somehow.
Yeah. Are there more questions from the audience side?
What is missing again on this very interesting panel is a definition of an artist agency. I mean, nobody talked about it. You know, you alluded to different models, which was closer to what UTA is doing stupidly in the art world of trying to bring artists to the luxury good industry and the fashion industry. But it's not about what is a truly pragmatic win-win artist agency. And for me, it's very simple. You know, there are 4 things that an artist or any artist needs. The first is social security and administration. You know, I had myself questions like, you know, I'm in Belgium, I'm Mexican resident, what do I do with my VAT, where do I declare, how do I have social security, and so on. The problem is then they throw it back to the galleries cannot answer because they don't have the economies of scale. The second is the production. You know, suddenly an artist comes and says, I want to work in leather, I want to work with this, I want to do blah, blah, blah. And again, the galleries must come with a solution and work very hard, and, you know, it's a waste of time and money because he's not equipped to do it. You know, he doesn't know the Suro ceramics or doesn't have contact with them and whatever, and it's a lot of waste of time. Third is PR. You describe it, the art world is about networking. So, but can you afford to have a PR agency, every one of them, or to be in contact with all the journalists, with all their difficulties and the fact they're all kind of a female mafia in many ways in the art world? The fourth is the babysitting. You have a call at 2 o'clock in the morning. Shit, I don't know. My next exhibition is coming up. I don't know what to do. And someone once must provide that. The problem is, this is what an artist agency actually is.
I mean, the babysitting part, I think we can all avoid that. No, you have friends for that. You have parents. I mean,
no, you don't have.
Galleries
The galleries in loco parentis.
Okay.
Let's be honest.
The galleries are the ones that are paid for it. So it's like the shrink. The friends.
So that is the 50%.
The friends can still say, after 10, I'm not picking up the phone anymore. The galleries cannot for the artist that is desperate. So I can tell you, I know it because I've lived with galleries, and that's what they have to do at 2 a.m. So. Those four discussions, those four elements are the basis of an artist agency, and you should be clear about it because there are different agencies. But this agency that I'm describing, someone doing it like at an industrial levels, providing those four services that you can create massive economies of scale, then suddenly it allows the galleries to focus on the relationship, the artistic relationship with the artist, the exhibition making, and the selling to the collectors.
But what you described looks pretty much like a gallery, I think.
Except the gallery cannot do it because they don't have the economies of scale. You have only four.
I think they all do that. We all do that. Jordan is here and she agrees.
But you do it poorly, I'm sorry to say.
Wait. Who are you? Sorry.
So, Jordan is a gallerist in New York.
Give her a microphone.
She knows.
Hi.
She's
The gallery is called Theta.
I think, like, also, for example, like the four needs of an artist that you describe, it's. I think there is no agency that could cover everything like this. For example, in fashion, we have like different person doing that, and that's also why I think it's too much for a gallery to do. Also, because at a point, if you have 4 artists, but if you have 10, if you have like 100, it's impossible to deal with all that and be good at everything. Or you have to have huge team.
At galleries, for small galleries, I think that when you're in the emerging sector, you're dealing with artists that are also emerging in their way, and they're new, often young, and they want a direct relationship with someone who's going to engage in all these things. They might want to seek an outside sort of support and production management assistance, but that babysitting thing, that therapist thing, that is very much, I find that artists want somebody who can understand them at every level of what they're trying to do and really see the whole picture through their eyes and, then feed back the world to them. And I think that the distance of the idea of an agency doesn't sort of engender that kind of intimacy in a relationship. And in terms of like production support, I mean, for me personally, I pay to be a member of not a kind of organization that I don't necessarily participate in that much. I've never done any of their fairs. I don't really get why I'm doing it, except for their listserv emails, whatever, this network of emails that I can reach out to at any point and say, does anyone know a leather maker that has a great rate in New York? And I have found resources through that time and time again, and I think that is one condition. I mean, there's also Invisible Dole, which is Annika Yee and Josh Klein's sort of network of emails of whatever. And I found countless solutions through the kind of network support of other gallerists and other creatives in my, vast economy of New York that makes my microeconomy much more viable.
Yeah, it's a question of scale, of course. So what you were describing is exactly, I think, the job of a gallery. And some do better, some do less, depending on the scale. Very huge gallery, of course, they need 2 or 3 very big artists to support this entire system. It's a huge device. It's a big machine. But I think why each agency could be very interesting in this fragmented situation. They need to be agile. They need to go to one-to-one. They have to connect with brands. I think that's exactly the opposite. The agency should be agile and light and be moving around, navigate within this complex world, while galleries are a larger structure that works for the medium and the long term. So I think in the 16 personality test, I'm a diplomat. So I would say we need both, and like galleries is a big boat, and the agency do a huge job, but in a more agile way.
Wait,
No, go ahead.
to respond to this question, I think it's a way of thinking. It's different. We don't have to have like centralized model to think about everything. I feel like you're proposing, like the point to talk about the art world is expanding, like the model has to be diversified, is to say there is a decentralized way of caring for the artist. Like a lot of agents, there are good artist agencies who don't want to just keep all the artists so intimate in their relationship. They can focus on their own craft. They can build their own supply chain, this particular medium or materials, and that can also help artists maybe in a more professional way.
Yeah, to be free, more free somehow.
Yeah. I think to suggest that, oh, there's a perfect artist agency, has the industrial scale and do this big umbrella thing and the emotional labor for the artist, I think it asks too much from the agency, I think.
I'm gonna it's always a little bit tricky to draw relationships between like personal and professional things, but since this is Provence magazine, I'm gonna be a little bit French. When I study this, I think Alain raises interesting points, but I think it's too declarative, it's too simplistic. The reality is what you've talked about is needs. An artist has needs, and those in an ever more complex world, those needs become ever more complex. And just as the more evolved discussions that we have now about what are your needs as a partner, what are your needs as a friend, where is the line between partnership and friend? Some people are in poly relationships, some people consider their friends more important than their romantic partners. And the point is this: what's important is not to say an agency does this, a gallery does this, an artist does this. What's important is for every artist to think about what are my needs, what are my boundaries, and to figure out what mix of people they want to work with in what ways to fulfill those needs and achieve their ambitions.
But wait, you are talking about something also very weird, because like, for example, for young artists, it's not you choose the gallery. Somehow the gallery choose you. So it's very weird, because that would be something that you have to choose the gallery too. I think it's really something really important, because if you I don't agree on the fact that it's obviously personal relationship. I think it can be also just professional, like for real. Like we are working together, we are not friends. Like,
yes, but the art industry is different in the sense that like it's not widget company being sold at Target, right?
No.
It's your name is on every work, and usually the gallerist's name is on the door, and this makes it a particularly intimate
but
and
everyone
emotionally
became
high
brands
charge.
too. Somehow some gallery become brands, and they are selling at the shop at Art Basel. I mean,
yeah, but when they get rejected from the fair, they take it very personally. And it makes a lot of sense why they take it personally, because not just their business, but also their name.
The name
is rejected.
We have 5 more minutes. Is there another question? Otherwise, we have to wrap up.
Because
take the mic.
Represent
Take the mic.
Tobias, as you're representing also kind of like the artist's position on the panel, and you're moderating at the same time, I'd like to get that you would get a question from the panel.
like, I think Tobias is already an agency, by the way. With Provence, you have a Robster, so it's somehow you're an agency too, right?
Then the next question would be, why is there no artist on the panel?
Why are there no artists on the panel?
That's what I say.
Well, there's also no gallerist on the panel. There's one gallerist on the panel. There's no agency on the panel. The whole,
But Tobias is an artist.
Yeah.
So
yeah, of course, we could have more.
Our question to you is, how do you see this? And how do your friends
see
this?
I think, I try to answer it, and the way I ask questions kind of, obviously that's why we initiated with Provence this panel because we see the need and to discuss this. We see the limit what galleries can do. We see need of agencies, but there's not a question, not a answer to this. There's not a solution, and this panel was not meant to give the perfect answer to it, but a way of discussing it. And I'm so thankful that you're all agreed to be on the panel.
Thank you.
And if you're all leaving out the room with more questions than answers, that's perfect. So thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.